I appreciate your coming here this evening to assist us in this business session. And finally, I'd like to extend a welcome to those of you who are watching at home on your televisions or on your computers. Extend to all of you on behalf of the school committee a warm greeting for the new year. And speaking of warm, I'd also like to take a moment to extend a personal get well to my counterpart on the Amherst committee, Catherine Appy, who is home with the flu, unfortunately. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, if you would please take a look at the agenda. You'll note that there's one item in particular that should stand out. We'll spend approximately an hour on that, but are there any requests for additional time on any of the items listed? Not hearing any then, I'm going to skip over the minutes just for a moment to go to announcements and public comment. And I'm going to ask Maria to start with her superintendent updates and any additional remarks that you want to make. Before you do that, though, before I forget, just another reminder that we have your car keys under lock and key. These are the warrants. I'm going to give them to Shabazz. He has the responsibility of handing them off to each of you as he signs them. Please make sure that you sign those that you are responsible for. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Maria?
Okay. So here are some updates. I'm just going to be brief with the updates tonight because I know we have a lot of information to go through that's really important for tonight. But I did want to make a few announcements. One is I just want to acknowledge Nick Grave, who has been reporting on our schools for...
Good job, Nick.
For how many years, Nick? How many years have you been reporting on our schools?
5 years.
5 years. And we thank him because we understand this will be his last regional meeting for us. So I'd like to thank you, Nick. And I know the committee, I'll speak for the committee, but thank you for all of your dedication and hard work on reporting on our schools.
Thank you.
So thank you. And maybe we'll see you in Amherst next week. We're not sure yet. But for region, we thank you. I also wanted to mention we have received our formal notification that, you know, the grant that we spoke about last time, the DESE grant, which is the planning portion of a potential regionalization project, should we go in that direction. We have received formal notification that we are awarded the grant. So that's very good news. We did adjust the budget after we spoke last time, and now we have funds now to support the work that we're doing, which is wonderful. So we're thrilled about that, and we will have an update on if we should be moving forward with an implementation grant. There's some follow-up questions that we'll be answering, I think, next week?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Tomorrow. It hasn't been in the forefront of my mind, clearly. Budget's been there. Tomorrow to see where we stand with that next phase of grants. So, and also, just in terms of brief updates, I do want to mention that Dr. Guevara has been working on some of our family engagement work to really look at a systemic approach to connecting with families. And one of the aspects of this work, which is a 6-session series called Family University, Roadway to Success, is beginning. The program is designed to assist families who are relatively new to Amherst, many of whom are English language learners, and many of whom are income eligible. And the major goal is to really help families understand and navigate our system, which we all know educational systems are complex. So this is an opportunity for people to connect, to understand and their rights and the community resources that are available. And this will begin focusing on curriculum advocacy and effective parent leadership skills, and starts on January 10th, which is in 2 days. So we're thrilled. If other people would like to have more information about this, they should contact Marta directly on our website. And we're thrilled, and I should have had a handout to give you for the Parent University. It's been a wonderful project that's come out of a group, I believe that Rick has been sitting with, to create opportunities for families. So we thank Marta and her group for bringing this forward. Also, just a brief reminder of, since this is the winter season, how people find out if we are canceling schools or delaying schools. We always have information on our website, as well as there's a line where people can call in, which is 362-1898. And I just want people to be reminded of that because things change kind of rapidly at this time of the year. Also, I think just briefly that the Rotary Club did award $10,000 to the high school to their athletic weight room, and we thank the Rotary Club very, very much, so that we're able to purchase some new weight equipment. And the grant was awarded really to the Hurricane Booster Club, but on behalf of our schools and our students. So I think it says that the new equipment will be unveiled January 17th at 1:15. And Mark will be there, as well as many of the Rotarians who are providing these funds, and Rich Farrell clearly as the athletic director and the Booster Club. So we really thank the Rotary Club, as always, for supporting our schools, and I'm sure our kids will be thrilled with this new equipment. So I think, Mark, the installment of Got Teens Get the Facts, would that be a helpful thing to put out there? What is our... I don't think February 7th, February 7th is the next.
17th. No.
7th.
Right, but the Flirting with Danger movie will be shown this Thursday, the 17th.
Oh, thank you. So
Next week from Thursday.
a week from Thursday, there'll be a filming of Flirting with Danger, which is a film, a teen film around, I'll let you. Sexual violence, which would be critically important for the community, as well as for older teens to come and view. And the time for that, Gene?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Also, there was a viewing also at Amherst Cinema about a month ago, so we're really excited to bring that here. Also, the next installment of Got Teens Get the Facts will be February 7th, and it will focus on pressures of a competitive society. Helping students really to strike a balance with the academics, athletics, internal and external pressures that they experience as adolescents. So sounds like some really amazing opportunities for our community and our families and students. So I think I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna say that there are other updates for people to take a look at, but I think it's probably more important that we move into bigger topics. Please.
Thank you very much, and just a personal thank you also to Nick for your serving the committee so well over the last 5 years. Thank you very, very much. Enjoy your retirement. I'd like to move to the minutes. We have 2 sets before us. Unless there are any changes in either of the sets, I'd like to take a motion to accept or approve both of them. If there are changes, then we can take them one at a time. But let's look first of all at the minutes for November the 27th. Are there any changes, corrections, etc.? Then I'd like to look at I had another set here, December 11th. Any additions, changes, or deletions, etc. on that set? And if not, I'm going to move to approve by unanimous consent, unless there's any challenge to that. Not hearing any of the minutes for those 2 dates are approved. Thank you very, very much. The next item is probably one of the most important we're going to face all year, and that I'm going to ask Maria to introduce Rob, who we all know, but preliminary remarks, and then Rob, I'm going to ask you to make the presentation. I want to note that I did skip over public comment. Is there anyone out there who would like to address the committee for no more than 2 minutes?
I didn't see any burning, issues out there, but.
Mary Lou, are you're gesturing there?
So we can hear you back.
Want me to speak up?
You all
Come up closer,
All of
Mary
us.
Lou.
You're like the students that I taught who sat in the back of the room, for
Come up
heaven's
and
sakes.
join
What's
us.
that all about?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy. We will try our best to increase the volume. Thank you. Notice, please, that the budget presentation is for discussion. There is no vote, but certainly while Rob is making his presentation, along with Maria, certainly keep writing down your questions, as this is an opportunity to make those initial questions. So, Maria?
Okay, great. So, Jerry, I need screens on. Mr. Champagne, I need screens on. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. And everyone will bear with me with technology because I'm trying to stay current and actually use it. So we'll see how we do here.
Modeling lifelong learning.
Yeah, exactly. I learn so much every day, Anne. Let me tell you. So tonight what we're going to do is I'm going to provide a bit of an introduction and an overview for the FY14 proposed budget. And I'm going to present a little bit of preliminary picture of adds and cuts at a very kind of broad scope. And then Rob is going to have an opportunity to walk us through the first view of our comprehensive spending plan, which is a whole lot of information for all of us to become familiar with before we come back together in a month's time with very detailed information. So I kind of want to begin with taking a bit of a step back of how we really started our work together as a group and as an administrative team, and kind of to give us some context of how we got to where we are today with crafting a budget. So you've all, I think, you were all here for these slides originally, but when a school district, again, is looking at how we are reforming or making improvements to a school district, we begin with our mission and our vision. It frames our work. We define why we exist and what do we want to become to fulfill our purpose. All of our reform efforts, our district improvement plan, and hence our budget should be tied directly back to the mission and vision of our schools. So the next step we took after having the discussion of mission and vision and our priorities, we had to take a quick look at our current demographics, our achievement data, so we had to identify where are we right now so we could see the gap between where we were, or where we are, and where we want to be. So we did this work, and based on our analysis of the current information and identifying that gap, we came before you with a district improvement plan and school improvement plans, which is pretty much, I like to describe it as a roadmap, or a blueprint, people would define. But it is the strategy that we're going to use to move us from where we are now to where we want to be. So the next step in the process, and what we're going to be talking about tonight, is developing a budget for our next school year. So we know where we are, we know where we want to be, we have a roadmap to get there, and now we need to apply the resources that we have, as they are, to meeting those goals. The process that we go through and that all of us will go through to create a budget is very complex. I have to thank up front the team of people who work with me day in and day out to make sense of the data, to create a budget that is thoughtful, comprehensive, keeps kids in the forefront. And it's not an easy task. So people do our team goes above and beyond. And we have multiple conversations and working sessions, which we've had over the past few months now, really looking at the data, analyzing historical trends, our current information, and creating what you're going to see in front of you tonight. And again, we thank you for approving the budget priorities and the guidance that probably about a month ago now, or 2 weeks to 4 weeks ago, because it really gave us a foundation that we started to craft our additions and, in many cases, our cuts. So again, over the next few months, there are moving pieces and moving aspects of a budget that we really do not have solidified yet. So as information comes into us, we will be adjusting what comes in front of you. Hopefully it all adjusts in a positive frame, but that doesn't always happen to be the case. So again, information is fluid at this time in the budget cycle. So tonight we're going to try to remind ourselves a little bit about our past, the past so many years in terms of our budget process. where we are right now in our current reality, and we're going to look to the future. So we're going to start with a bit of an overview of our past few years. And it's important to really state up front that we've been really fortunate that we have towns that support our appropriated budget through their assessments. They've been asked to support, over the past 5 years, I'd say relatively modest annual growth in their assessments. There's been much more variance if you look at more of a 10-year picture over time, but the past 5 years, it's been what I would consider modest growth. So you see on the slide and in front of you on your slides as well, the average annual increases from FY09 to FY13 per town. I think it's important to mention, well, you know, when you look at percentages, it's a modest increase. We also have to really recognize the challenge that our towns face when they are trying to support not only their community resources, you know, police and fire and other critical services to their community, but they're also trying to support their elementary schools and our regional assessment. So this is not, there aren't light requests when we bring this information in front of our 4 towns. So we greatly appreciate the support. We also, our challenge has really been to maintain the services and programs that we all value, that our community values, while we're receiving this modest increase. And at the same time, we have to make educational improvements, and we have to respond to the changing needs of our students. Again, it's complex. For the past 5 years, our budget restrictions have been significant. They've been felt, and we have met the challenge. We've done the work that we needed to close gaps over a 5-year period. So, you know, while we have received these modest increases from the towns, we also have seen, we've been realizing other factors that have decreased revenue, and we've experienced an increase in some fixed costs. This requires us to really focus on realizing as many efficiencies as possible. So just to note for the committee and for the community that we have spent a substantial amount of time over the past few years, which I've spoken to the 4-town meeting group about for at least the past 2 years now. We focused on energy efficiencies. Ron Bohanowitz has come in front of us and talked about his conversion from oil to gas in some cases, how he's monitoring our schools at a larger scale from distance so that he can shut down certain systems when they're not necessary so that we're conserving. Also, efficiencies such as the Windows project at the middle school, which will help us over time. It's helping us now and over time. We've also been very strategic around the type of budget cuts that we've realized so that we are providing a range of offering to our students while having to reduce staff and often through attrition. We've increased the use of school choice revenue. We've added additional slots over the past year, and that's varied over probably a 10-year period. And this additional revenue source has been helpful to us. We've also worked with our town partners to make modifications to our healthcare choices. And we've been much more strategic about the use of grant funds because it's become apparently clear, as you'll see further in this presentation, that the revenue streams have become much more narrow, so that we have to become much more strategic in where we place those funds. We've also moved to a much more embedded professional development model so that we're spending less to send staff out to professional development, that kind of one-shot PD, and really build the internal capacity of our staff to leverage changes that need to occur. And I have to say thank you that we are very fortunate for our community partners because we've leveraged resources by partnering with our universities, colleges, the towns, and various service providers. People step up to partner with us so that we realize a greater benefit for the less resources that we all are sitting with. And I want to just make a quick mention of our web-based technologies. We really have been conscious of while we may not see a savings in cost of switching to some of the web-based technologies, we see the efficiency and the time that it takes our administrative staff to complete tasks and responsibilities, which in effect allows us the latitude to improve where we really need to. So we've increased by the use of Kronos, which is our HR software. I'm not using software probably appropriately, but Kronos, I'll just say it in that way. ConnectEd and School Messenger, making our times, making us more efficient to be able to send out information in differing ways. Also, my learning plan in Oasis, which is a way to address our educator evaluation management of that new model. And this has really been, all of these strategies have realized some efficiencies where in some cases save money and in others just allow us to have the opportunity to spend our time differently. And primarily, our budgets have been preserved while we've realized reductions, and it's been challenging. We have received an influx of funds from stimulus, which has really helped us out over time. And it's important to kind of paint that picture so people can see how that has helped us out for a number of years now, probably 4 or 5 years. So we have a new fiscal reality. We've all been hearing this in other parts of our world, listening to the news. We do as well. Reducing state and federal aid impacts the town's collective share. So what are our challenges? In our current year and in the future, the stimulus package, the funding is ending. There's been a significant impact on grant funding, which supports the budget beyond what the towns provide to us in their assessment. We provide for staffing, services, materials through these resources that are now ending. Some have ended already, and some will be tapering out very soon. We've also seen a decline in the availability of grants, competitive grants, and the support of our entitlement grants. So we're seeing decreasing grant funding as a whole. We've been, I think Rob's term has been, we've been very conscious of having stimulus funding and feathering them out over years, I'll use his language, so that the cliff wasn't as steep for us, but we are feeling the impact of, while that helped us temporarily, we are feeling that cutoff now. So one visual around our grant funding, if you're looking at FY09 to FY14, you can see the bulk of our stimulus funds were, we appreciated those funding from FY09 to really FY12. We have a little bit that's in place now, but really by FY14, there are little to none other than some small race to the top funding, very small. So we get to see the declining additional support, which is not the appropriated budget, but it's real to us in terms of how we use, revenue streams. Some additional challenges currently and in the future. There's, in addition to the stimulus funding and declining grants, there's clearly sluggish economy growth at the state level, which reduces our capacity, their capacity for them to support the schools at a percentage that was really appreciated in the 1990s. We're seeing a very differing level of support in terms of state support. We're also seeing, as a district and across the state, a declining enrollment. That's just another factor that we need to consider, and it is a challenge for us now and in the future. Also, Chapter 70, or state aid, is supporting less of our budget, 15% lower over the past 10 years. And we all recognize that the state is currently sitting in a situation for FY13 right now of a significant shortfall, I think of $540 million or something to that effect. So again, there's a lot of unknowns of how the current economy will be affecting our school districts this year and in the future. Many of you have, I think you've seen this before at the town meeting. This represents the state and local aid, the actual and adjusted dollars, adjusted for the rate of inflation. We also have another visual to share, which I think many of you have viewed this one as well. This demonstrates the state and local aid as a percentage of our overall budget. And you see that the red line indicates the state aid as a percentage of the operating revenue, and the town assessments is the blue line. And you can see what direction that's moving. Another factor that we referenced earlier is our declining enrollments. So this is a visual that helps us to see from FY2 to projecting forward. So we're at the purple or magenta dotted line, the line between the actuals and projections. These figures include our choice revenue. So you'll see kind of a leveling of the past of, FY11 and FY12, FY13. That's because of the strategic use of choice to level our enrollment figures at that point. But we are seeing a continued decline. And there will be some discussions that we have to have in the future around, with this decline happening, how are we going to continue to use choice? So that's a future conversation. Again, when you move into the comprehensive spending plan, if people want to make note now, our enrollment information in general is on page 217, just so that when you want to go back and look at more detail here, to put numbers with this, you can. Another challenge that we face, and this information is in the book as well on page 223, which helps you to understand this complex formula. This is the trend in charter school net cost per pupil. This does not represent the number of students we have out in charter school. It illustrates the cost to the district per pupil. So it's based on their wonderful state reimbursement formula. And this is a change in the aid formula. So you see in FY5, we had a little over $4,000 we were paying out for students who were attending charter schools, and you can see where we are at the moment in terms of what we're being charged per student. And according to this formula, which is highly complex, and I'm not going to be the one to speak to it in detail, but that the understanding is that this should level out in some sense in about 6 years. So this is not a short-term issue that we have to keep in the back of our mind. So some other factors that we are just kind of aware of and considering over the next few years. We do have some funds that are currently allocated within the appropriated budget, which have to do with a roof repair, I guess that's probably the best.
Partially roofing and partially repair.
Thank you. So that cost will be ending in FY18, so that's good news. We won't be needing to see that out for past FY18. We also have to be highly aware of our retirement assessments. We have some long-term costs. And we are aware of what the increase is for us this year and what that looks like over time. We also have to be aware of the impact on contract negotiations, cost of living, and steps. And we have to be highly aware of our excess and deficiency fund, which for the committee and the community is our reserves. And we need to make sure that we maintain a healthy balance so that we put us in a good position for a strong bond rating in the future, should we need a bond rating. Future expenses that we may incur. So these are just some other factors that we keep in the forefront of our minds as we're looking at the budget in the short term and in the long term. In the meantime, and I'm prefacing this by saying these school reform efforts are overall highly positive. These changes that are coming as mandates from the state and federal government, which have increased costs, are overall positive for our students and the eventual outcomes that our students will demonstrate. And the state, as they're asking us to make these changes, they're either unfunded or underfunded. So we are in the midst of curricular changes. We've been talking to, and Dr. Cohen's been talking to us about the Common Core. She and Mike Morris and Ian Stith have also been speaking to us about PARC, which is the new assessment system. We clearly have the new educator evaluation model and the required development for our educators, which Mike has been primarily holding and rolling out for our system in our district, and a greater focus on student achievement metrics and outcomes of student achievement. And as always, greater reporting requirements we're required to comply with, and just an overall, we have changing compliance requirements that we have to be responsible for in terms of grant funding or specific program areas such as special education, ELL, civil rights, and we're responsible to comply and then also to monitor our, our effectiveness. So all of these things are happening, and they're good things for our kids, and they still have an effect on the system. So what that means for us is, I like Mike's visual of the scale. You know, we're fortunate that we have support of our member towns on the left side of our scale. We are using some increased school choice funds. We are realizing some efficiencies, and we are targeting some budget cuts. And on the weightier side of the scale, we have a reduction in state aid in real dollars. We have a declining enrollment. We have the end of stimulus and declining grant funds. And we have an increase in labor costs and increased legacy cost and charter costs. So we can see what direction the scale is tipping in for us this year, which we talked about at our last meeting, which, excuse me, leaves us with a gap. So, our final slide, and really just frames some of the statements I want to make before we go into get mired in the numbers. This is really an important moment in time for our school districts, for our schools and for our communities. It really is time for us to take a moment to step back and to really reflect and to look at our schools through a new lens. It's imperative that we address clearly the current issues that we have and the current gaps and needs, but we have to maintain an eye toward the future. No longer can we be in the position to each year just continue to cut. We really need to think about a longer plan to live within our fiscal reality. So we have to partner with our communities, and we have to be really deliberate in the decisions that will allow us to maintain what I consider, and I think many people in our community consider, exceptional educational programming for our kids in the future, currently and in the future, and living within that fiscal reality. That's a change for all of us. We've been realizing it over time, but we have to be really conscious and deliberate in these decisions now. We need to keep the students who are entering kindergarten this coming year, who will be the graduating class of 2027. We have to keep them in focus, because not only are we going to address our immediate needs, we also have to make sure that we as a community, school committee, faculty, and staff, that we're dedicated to making decisions that will leave our future students as strong or stronger an educational system than we have right now. And that's not an easy undertaking. So over the next few years, there will be, I believe, and I would describe it as a period of innovation. There'll be a period of great change, and it will present us with significant challenge. So to be really candid, and I would say this to staff as well as to the community and the committee, this level of structural change will not come without some wrenching moments. This is going to be hard. And we will have some difficult decisions to make. And the outcome of this work will leave us with a much more sustainable system, which will meet the needs of all of our kids, including our future kids. The conversation we're going to have to reach this goal is going to be challenging, dynamic, over time. So for tonight, our goal is to put in front of you what our immediate work is. So we have some immediate work, which is basically addressing our gap for this year. Over the next few months, our leadership team will be spending a substantial amount of time talking about the factors that we have to consider to inform some long-range planning and long-range decisions. So I guess I can't understate that this moment in time is different for our schools, and that's a challenge, but it's actually a very important moment for us to be here right now and to start to look at how we're addressing our schools' programming, supports, services, how do we maintain what we love, and live within a different picture than we had to in the 90s. So, I'm going to ask Rob to walk us through the comprehensive spending plan to put the information in front of you. And then I'm going to address a little bit kind of at a very general level some of the adds and cuts that you'll see in front of you tonight. And note that in a month's time is where we get a little more information coming from the state, and we'll be in a position to come in front of you in, at that period of time at our next meeting, which I think is the 12th, the next budget meeting on the 12th, for us to really address some of the specifics. So that's my overview, so that we're all starting at the same place. And now, Rob, if you'll bring us to the numbers and to the data, that would be helpful.
More binders.
Binders full
I
of
need a
numbers.
bookcase soon.
Yes, you do.
Binders full of numbers.
It's a lot of information.
Let's see where to start.
But we need to make decisions.
We'll have more books tomorrow for the directors and so forth, but we didn't have time to put it together.
A plus for presentation.
Okay, so I'm not going to get mired in the numbers with you. What I want to do is orient you to all the data and information that we consider in doing a budget. So this year, the order of things is a little bit different than last year, but the information is the same. You'll find everything there somewhere. So behind the flashy, colorful tab thing is a table of contents. So you can look on the table of contents and find just what you're looking for. Okay. So in the introductory section, we have letter of superintendent, we have accomplishments for the current year, initiatives, the challenges, and so forth. The second tab is organizational. And on page 17, there's a school administration. On 18, you'll see the central office organization. On page 19, you'll find the school committee guidance you all provided. On page 20 is a local funding structure. And on page 21 is fund types. I'm going real fast here because I'm going to slow down at certain points. I don't want to spend all night with you. So, first place I want to look at with you is page 21, which describes the types of funds that compose the operating budgets of the school district. And one of the funds, the big fund, the main fund, is the general fund. Makes sense? And that's really the budget we're looking at tonight in detail, is the general fund budget. But I want to point out to page 21 that also I want to speak a bit about E&D. What is E&D? It's access and efficiency. It's similar to the free cash in a city or town, and so we're going to come back to that, but here's a definition for you to refer to. And the other than the general fund, there are what they call special revenue funds, and that's two main groups. There's grant funds and revolving funds, and you can look on 22 for definition of what they are. So then we get to the financial section. And on page 27 is the consolidated spending plan. The consolidated spending plan consists of the general fund, but it also consists of grant funds and revolving funds. So here you're going to see all of the cash that flows through the system, not just the general fund. I'm going to spend most of the time tonight talking about the general fund budget, revenue and expenses, but also want you to see the grant funds and the revolving funds. So we'll loop back to that. So, page 28, we start looking at the general fund revenue budget. And page 28 describes the revenue sources that support the general fund. Let's keep moving along to page 31, which is the FY14 revenue budget as it stands right now. Okay. And you've seen this way of doing it before, but let me just touch base on this. In FY14, we're projecting a 0.9% in Chapter 70. And you'll see right below that a minus 91,000. That minus 91,000 is going to stabilization to pay for that middle school renovation that Maria alluded to earlier. As you can see, that number is going down. And why is that important? Because as we go forward over the next few years and then it drops off, we won't be using anything from Chapter 70 to pay that bill. It'll be all coming into general fund support. Okay, so that's the good news. The other little pieces are Medicaid reimbursement. We brought in a little less last year than we expected. Charter reimbursement, we're going to loop back again later on, but this is reimbursement, and in the expense budget, we're going to show the tuition we pay. So we'll get back to that. Interest, again, is down from what it used to be. And for FY14, I'm projecting a use of $400,000 from E&D for budget support to be spent. And I'm going to loop back to that also. You have the E&D for contingency. That's been in place now for a number of years at $280,000. Should something happen, should we need it, it's there if you take further action to vote on its use. Otherwise, it's not used. So when you put all that together, our total revenue goes up 1.9%, which means that our expenses can go up 1.9%. That's all predicated on the assessments, the member towns. And right now, we're projecting an increased assessment to member towns of 3.54%. And as you can see, how that plays out amongst the member towns is different because of the shifting enrollment, 5-year average rolling enrollment. So this is a page to keep coming back to see, okay, what support do we have to fund the expense budget. I'm going to pause here. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But I don't want to get stuck either. Okay, I'll keep going. Next page, as you already saw on the slideshow, page 32 is state aid in actual and constant dollars, adjusted for inflation. Page 33 is the assessment of member towns, again, in actual and constant dollars. So constant dollars has been pretty stable now for about 5 or 6 years. And on page 34 is that state aid and assessments as a percentage of the operating budget. You can see where that's going. But I want to spend a little bit of time on page 35. You remember on page 31, excuse me, let's go back to that for a minute, that revenue budget. If you look at the E&D for budget support line, so next to the last of the bottom one there. In FY11, used $255,000 from E&D for support. This year we're using $633,000, and next year we're using $400,000. So what does that mean? So on page 35, you can see what that means and how it works. Top part is our E&D certified each year in the green. So at the end of this last fiscal year, E&D was certified at $1.3 million, or 4.5% of our combined budgets for this year. For next year, I project only about $50,000 flowing back into E&D from unexpended sources. And if we use $400,000 to support the budget next year, it will decrease E&D by $350,000, bringing it down to 3.29%. And the year after that, if we lower our use of E&D to $300,000, try to feather it back down, we'll be decreasing E&D again by a couple $100,000 to 2.59%. So that's a moving piece, and that's important because of our bond rating, which we actually have a bond rating and it's reviewed every year. So it's not something that we just look in the future. It's happening now. So we also talked about choice earlier, and the middle section has our choice experience, how much revenue we've brought in, how much we expended for budget support each year, what the fund balance is. And as you can see, for FY13, we have budgeted to use $470,000. And for next year, we're budgeting to use $717,000. And then, given our enrollment this year, it's going to be a little bit less. So at the very bottom section, you may recall from last year, we were looking at how do we decrease our dependence on an E&D by increasing our choice revenue so that we don't have a drop in funding. And so you can see that in FY13, we did a little shift, increased the budget. 14, we can use more choice, less E&D, and have about the same 1.1 million from the combined sources. After that, starting in 15, we're going to have to start living with a reduced dependence on these two sources.
Can you define what the expenses are for choice? Is that for the expenses related to running our choice component, or is it for paying for kids who choice out?
No, we're going to show you that in a minute.
Okay.
Actually,
Great, thank you.
exactly where it's spent, what it's spent on. Good question. Any other questions on this? It's the balancing thing. So you're looking, all this is trying to put together all the different sources, the moving targets, and how it balances, right? Okay. All right. So that's the revenue budget. Now let's look at the expense budget for the general fund. So on page 37, we're going to see the expense budget. And that's, if you go back to page 27, that's the general fund column, but now you're seeing 5-year history and what's happened there. So this top part has to do with level services, which is defined as, on the left, you'll see, is essentially taking what we have now, rolling it forward to next year with known or projected increase in costs. So we started with a budget this year, and some things have shifted. We've hired new people. We have turnover. We have increased the number of out-of-district placements, if you would, for whatever reason. We have a different experience with utilities. And so just carrying it forward, we would be increasing the budget 1.4 million. Okay? Now, you're all going to ask me, what is all that stuff? So I'm going to give you a quick handout and tell you exactly what's what.
I'm trying to make a cheat sheet of this. That is the word.
So, thanks. If you look at any given line, so let's take in the expense accounts section, first line is regular education. It shows on this page 37 that we're going up $101,000. If you look on this page, it'll say expense accounts, total regular education accounts going up $101,000. And so that is charter tuition assessment going up $117,000, choice assessment going down $14,000. That's how we get the increase of 101. Okay. And I'm not going to go through this whole thing right now, but all of these changes, all these differences are listed here and as to what contributes to them. Okay, so that's fine, but a minute ago we did the revenue budget, and it looked like we could support a budget of $29,050. That's a gap of $923,000. So that's the nub of the issue. Okay? So level of services increased 1.4. And before I leave this sheet, I want to point out, look at the year-to-year increases of the expense budget. Okay? It's going up 0.9, down 1.2%, up 0.3%, up 0.8%. 13, it went up 3.8, and now projecting an increase for FY14 of 1.8. Unfortunately, we have decreasing revenues, so the assessment of member towns is going up quite a bit more than that. And again, that's one of those fulcrums. Expenses aren't going up much, but because of declining other revenues, our assessments of member towns are going up quite a bit. That's the rub. Okay, the next couple pages compares FY04 to FY14, general fund, okay? And I think for me, it's page 39, it shows what has been going on. And that we have health insurance premiums for retirees and active employees, and special education. You take those three items, and that accounts for 2/3 of the increase over the last 10 years. 5.1 million out of the 7.6 million. Yeah, that's probably not a surprise to anybody. There it is. So what are we going to do about that gap that we just talked about? Well, Maria's alluded to it, and on page 41 is the initial pass at what the current thinking is. And I'm going to let Maria talk about this for a little bit, because it's been hard work, and
Okay.
deserves a lot of credit.
Sure. So, again, this is very much the first pass, which has taken us a substantial amount of time just to really get a handle on a gap of what we were sitting with of $900,000. We do each year, and these are very general descriptions right now, because I want to just share with the committee that we won't become much more detailed than this until our next meeting, primarily because we do have those factors that are changing, and when we start talking about specific reductions, we're talking about people. So our goal is always to support our staff in being able to do the hard work with our students and not have to be sitting in, or sit in as least amount of time as possible, oh my gosh, who's not going to be here next year? So in a month's time, you will have much more specific information, because then people will be able to know, and we will have spoken to staff about what these cuts might mean. So in terms of budget adjustments and additions, each year there are changes that need to be made to the appropriated budget. And this, what you see here are some categories, such as we look at our actual spending in our history, and some lines we make adjustments, because if we have been spending in a certain area, such as maintenance and supplies, we know that to maintain our buildings at a certain level, we need to increase that line. We need to be real with our expenses. So we see that for supplies, maintenance of equipment, and legal costs. We also have known increases, like software, licensing, and dues, each year when those things are going up, so you account for that. Also, we have new needs. So we have actual students who we are aware of, and these are mandated costs, needs for monitors, extended year services, and tutors. So we factor those needs into the additions and adjustments. Also, we also have made some investment consistent with our district improvement plan to purchase assessment system, student assessment system that we spoke about. That's the Partner to Power School Inform. So there's some things we've purchased that we'll be implementing next year, so we know that's a known cost, but they are new expenses to support what we have identified as our need and our goals. Also, you will see in more detail, I will make some specific recommendations around additions, around closing our proficiency gaps that we see right now within our schools. So make real our commitment to making a difference for all of our kids. So that is factored into the $261,000 that you see as adjustments or additions. And then in terms of reductions, I'm going to kind of give the broad stroke at this point, because again, we have not had conversations with staff. However, you see we are striving to prepay retirement costs for those staff who will be retiring, who have identified to us that they are retiring next year. If I can pay those out of this year's budget, I can take that off the top as a reduction of $117,000. That's what's calculated for those staff that will be exiting. Also, we did not have any requests for sabbaticals this year, so I'm able to reduce $30,000 there. And then we also have staffing adjustments. So we see a reduction of 9.3 FTE at this time, which means we've done our internal work as a leadership team to identify either places that we can reduce based on enrollments, which is always our goal. If there's some enrollment reduction that we can realize some cuts, that's wonderful. We also try to be strategic if we have, through teachers who are retiring or leaving, if there's some adjustments within the program. So through attrition, we try to make some reductions. We also, the reality is that some of these reductions will result in increased class size, and they will constrict and/or cut some programs. What that's going to look like, the specifics you'll see in a few weeks. And I think the important thing to note here is that, so the work that we have, where we are in our process, we had our essential ads identified and adjustments. We went through a process of cutting to a certain point, and we still have a gap at the moment of $400,000. We have not at this moment closed our gap. So that is our work between now and the next time we meet, to become very specific for you, as specific as we can be for you and the community around the effects of cuts. Also to wait for updated information to hope that some of this gap will be reduced. Quite honestly, I believe we're going to have to go the distance of a $900,000 cut. I'm not holding out that there'll be some change in revenue or something that will help us out, quite honestly. So we're going to be making some hard decisions over the next month. So that's the level of detail that I will be providing at this moment. But again, over the next 4 weeks, we'll be coming in front of you and we'll be talking about the specific impact. So what programs will we not have any longer? And what would the class size be looking like in specific areas? That will be our next meeting.
Thanks. Okay, so that's that. I want to point out that now from page 46 to 167 is a line-by-line budget, item budget for every department, every line. On the left-hand side of the book, you see a description of what is funded by each line in that line on budget. And on the right-hand side is the proposed budget for FY14 and the previous 5 years and what the changes are. Okay, so I'm not going to spend time with that, but maybe you want to do data mining, go for it. It's all there.
That's good. It's a lot of information.
So that's the heavy lifting. But it's not the whole picture. So I want to really spend a little bit more time talking to you about the rest of what's happening in this district. So the next section is on grant funding. On page 171 is just a summary of all our grants for 5 years, what we're looking at in 14. Some of it looked familiar from the slide that Maria showed earlier. Mm-hmm. And then from page 172 to 183 is each grant for each year, including the FY14 budget. Left-hand side describes what the grant's for, what the expenses go towards, and on the right-hand side is the numbers. So you see that. Then the section 5 is revolving funds. Page 187 is your summary of all of our revolving funds. And then starting on page 188 to 203 is individual funds, the description on the left, budget on the right. First one up on 189 is athletic revolving. 191 is preschool. And I want to spend a minute on 193, circuit breaker. So circuit breaker, this guy on the left, to remind you, is reimbursement for the state for high-cost special ed needs. So there's a foundation budget up to which we are responsible for the cost, and over that foundation budget, the state will reimburse us a percentage of whatever's over. Okay? And so that revenue comes into the circuit breaker revolving fund, and the next year it gets applied to special education needs. So we can see in budget 193, where does that go? It goes to help with tuition to out-of-district placements. And just so you get a picture of, the total picture of out-of-district placement funding, on the left side on 192, you're going to see the total tuition over the years for out-of-district placements and how much is spent, how much is covered by circuit breaker, and how much is covered by appropriations, and to what kind of placements it's going to. Okay, so that starts to answer your question, Mike, but we're going to do more. Because over on,
Can I ask a question about that?
sure, yeah.
About how many students do we have in the district right now that this budget represents?
All right, so let me look, because I can have that for you. In terms of region, I want to say we're probably around 17 students, but let me just make sure. Special education, out of district.
227.
Yeah, it's on page 227.
227,
The
yeah.
number of students. All right, so there are 25 students placed out currently as of December 2000. And then, let's see. So our current is 25 students and projected 23
Well,
students.
Well, I'm afraid that
Private tuition.
what we're looking at here, Maria, is really a special out-of-district tuition and kids. But not all the circuit breaker money is from out-of-district kids, right? We have some in-house kids.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's probably a question I have to get back to you on.
It's some portion of this money is going for out-of-district.
It offsets the.
Yeah, we
the
spend,
cost.
everything we get, we spend to offset out-of-district placements.
So this is not, all right.
Yeah.
All right,
Right.
get back.
Okay.
And again, if I can put into, it's just important to note that the level of need of students who are in out-of-district placements is substantial, and it's such that we, it's the least restrictive setting for a child, so that we need to be, you know, these placements can cost anywhere from, I would say, day placements are around $60,000 to residential placements of over $200,000 for one child. And it's an important responsibility, you know, for us to support students well, whether they're in-house, in our programs or out. And students with needs there's a substantial cost. So I guess that's just the reality. It's important to state that, you know, in-house, and we, in either case, we're able to realize some circuit breaker reimbursement above a foundational level, which I want to say is like $38,000 or something to that extent.
I think it hit 40 this year.
40, did it?
Yeah.
Okay, 40,000, and you receive a reimbursement of a percentage above the foundation, which is above $40,000.
So the next one I'll look at with you is school choice revolving on page 201. And you'll see that for FY 9 through 12, what we used out of the school choice fund just went for budget support. And effective this year, FY 13, there's a change that we apply the expenses, we pay the expenses out of that fund rather than leaving the expenses in the general fund. And they're just using this as a revenue stream, okay? So for this year, we paid tuition out of this fund, but the best practice is to actually pay for instructional costs, and best practice is to pay for teachers. So for FY 14, we'll be paying teachers out of this fund, okay? And down below, you'll see the revenues that have been coming in. And as we use and apply these funds, you can see how the balance in the fund will go down. So we can't keep up the 717 for long, but it'll help us. Now on the left, you can see what the history is and what the where it's been going for the last couple of years, how the expenses come in. Okay. So that answer your question, Mike?
Partially. How do you figure out the number of teachers? Because it's just a marginal increase of students, right?
Yeah. We just have to apply it to educational expenses. And so it doesn't matter what it is. It's just easiest to capture a chunk of teachers and apply their
Okay.
salaries there.
Okay,
So
so
we'll identify-
it's an amount that's applied as opposed to some calculation of,
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. We've done a cohort of
Right.
teachers
Yeah.
whose salary adds up to that amount.
got it,
Yeah,
okay,
it's that
thank you.
simple.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't spend too much time on this. I think, page 204, I wanted to point out to you. Also, we have a consolidated athletic budget because athletics is paid for in large part by their revolving fund and in part by appropriated budget. So just to get a full picture of the athletic department, we put this consolidated budget for you there, so you can see what gets paid from where. Good. Then tab 6 is the capital section of the district. You'll see on 206, 207, the capital budget you all approved for next year, and a report on how it's going for the capital budget you approved for this year. Page 208 to 211 is the actual budget document you all looked at and voted and approved on the 27th of November. And on 212 is the current debt assessment to member towns. And on 213 is the debt assessment to member towns if our capital plan comes to fruition, wherein at the end of FY14 we issue a long-term bond for $1.5 million. Now it's a pretty rough estimate because it's assessed to member towns based on the EQV in effect at the time, and that will change before we get to this date. So, but it's close. It'll give you approximation as to what we're looking at. Tab 7, moving along, information section. So we'll see enrollment data, and then you get into page 218, vocational school enrollment, tuition costs. 219 is choice out enrollment, tuition costs. Page 221 is charter school enrollment, tuition costs, reimbursements. And for those of you really curious, on page 223 is understanding charter school tuition reimbursements. Right? So it had one formula in place until 2 years ago, and last year we changed from the 160-40 method to the 125, 25, 25, 25, 25 method. How's that, huh? So as you read this, what the state is trying to do is to, I don't know what they're trying to do, but what they say they're doing is that eventually, once this plan is phased in, we'll actually get more reimbursement than we're getting now. Unfortunately, in the first few years, because we're not getting 160-40, we're getting 125-25, do the math, we get that spike. And you saw that in Maria's graph, right? So the last 2 years on that graph per pupil spikes up. That's what's going on here. But as it gets fully implemented, it's supposed to come down a little bit. So we'll wait for another 4 years and see if that happens. Page 226, we're looking at special education on district placements, enrollment, tuition costs. And again, for out-of-district tuition, on 227, you can see how much is funded from circuit breaker and appropriations. You saw that, it's a redundant thing, we've seen that before. And also in 227, we look at homeless enrollments, McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which is interesting because you look at the graph and FY12 spiked in our enrollment of homeless kids from out of district, from in district who are now living somewhere else. And FY13, we have nobody. I think that's ironic since they just this year decided to fund some of that for us. Anyway, page 229 to 243, outcomes. What happens to our kids? Advanced placement participation, SAT trends, class graduation rates, where the kids are going, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all there, interesting stuff. Yes. 250, you have district staffing profile. This is an important one to look at. It's, okay, over the last 5 years, what's the staffing profile look like? How many people in English, math, science? How many paraprofessionals? How about building administration, central administration, et cetera? So it's all here. You can see what the trends look like over the last 5 years. And that is then followed by a detailed, line-by-line breakout of staffing. Projections, what it is this year, projected for next year. And these lines, if you look at the page 1, it's English, and then we have high school teachers, high school English teachers, totaling 9.9 FTEs. If you go back to that line-by-line expense budget, this is that line. So you can see how much dollar is budgeted, and you can see the FTEs here. Okay. So I just wanted to give you an orientation as to what's in the book, what you can find where. I'm not going to digest it all at once, but there's a lot of stuff in here as to how the district works, what the moving parts are, how it fits together, and we'll have further conversation. The next steps, revenues. The governor comes out with his initial budget projection on January 23rd, I think it is, fourth
25th
Wednesday.
is what we're hoping.
So by the 25th or so of this month, we'll have a sense of how Chapter 70 will trickle down to us, and we'll be able to factor that in. The other revenue piece is assessments from member towns. So right now, we looked at that a little bit. It affects some towns harsher than others. How's that going to work? We have a 4-town meeting coming up on Saturday. We'll be having that discussion to see what's possible. And then we'll have to look at expenses further and do further work on that expense budget. Whether it's the current revenue support, or if the revenue support's different than what we project today. It could be higher, it could be lower, we'll have to see. And by the time we have our next meeting on February 12th, we'll have a lot more answers. And I bet you have a lot more questions, too. So keep them coming. Can I answer any questions now?
Page 38 and 39 really does tell kind of a story that, you know, over the last 10 years, it looks like the two things that are kind of devouring the budget are the health insurance for both employees and retirees and special education. But I don't know if special education is as bad as it looks, because what might be going on is that population staying the same and the rest of the population shrinking. So it might be interesting to see what the population was 10 years ago of both regular education and special education compared to now.
Yep.
And then possibly like a cost per student for regular education and special education to see if the reason why, you know, what's going on is the population going up or going down, or is the cost per kid going up or going down.
That's right. One of the big variables in there is out-of-district tuitions. Right? So we have to tease that out also, as well as how much it costs to educate kids in district. So you're right. The insurance, and when you do a 10-year look at something like this, it kind of overlooks some of the finer points. Take health insurance for employees. For the last couple of years, it's been 0% increase, right? Or very small. But you go back, I don't know, 8 years, 7 years, maybe it's even something like that. We had 28% increase one year, right? So that really skews this whole thing. But over 10 years, it's over 10 years. So.
I also wanted to mention, in terms of special education, we'd be happy to take that look, because I think part of what you're referencing is, I'd be interested to see if that is factual, that the number of special education students has remained maybe more constant than the general demographics. But also, I think another factor that's important to make note of, which, you know, Faye and I will take a look at, is that, you know, we are realizing a changing demographic within our special education population aging into the secondary schools, because a number of years ago, we were having a much more, a larger population of students at the elementary level who had significant needs for a whole host of reasons. And now that general population of students are aging up into the secondary schools. So we're seeing, as you viewed a few weeks ago with the capital plan, we increased the programming and adjusted the programming for developmental studies, which is our program for students with significant needs, because that population of students, I believe, has doubled or tripled over the past few years for our school system. And typically, those are the students who have higher costs. So we'd be happy to take a look at that and kind of look at that analysis over the time, but also the cost, kind of connected to students with more significant needs.
Just quickly too, I just wanted to compliment you on the budget presentation, because I know you started working on this 3 years ago, and it's just gradually gotten better and better. So.
Thanks.
Rob, can I ask you a quick question on the consolidated athletic budget on page 204?
Sure.
On the revenues from the athletic revolving fund, does that include fundraising from booster organizations as well?
No, does not.
So when those monies are used, how is that reflected in the budget?
The current practice is that the boosters, for the most part, just buy whatever they're buying and donate it to the athletic department. And the cash does not flow through our books.
Okay, and so it doesn't even count as a private gift because it's not cash, it's...
Well, it would. No, yeah, if it was cash, it would come in as a private gift.
Okay, because that's listed as none for fiscal year 2013.
True.
So there...
We should check.
Okay, and then my other question on that page is, so the operating budget, support for athletics, looks like it's limited to payroll, athletic director, clerical staff, and coaching. Does any of that cover during the school day activities, like physical education, or is that all after-school athletics?
No, it covers during the day. I mean, it's the athletic director's full salary.
Right, but what about for like coaching? Are they also teachers during the day? And
That's differentiated,
Yeah.
that's separated
That's-
between salary lines for staff versus coaching, which would be.
Right.
So that would be a different
Yeah.
salary line than this one
That's right,
shown on
yeah.
this. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just an old-fashioned guy. I think I can consistently look at these things the wrong way than my colleagues. But I'm looking at some areas in our projections for FY14 that are really big jumps from the 5-year history.
What page are we looking at?
So particularly, I'm asking about legal services.
Legal services.
It's like $1.5 million.
Okay.
What page?
It's on the handout. that they had done.
The addendum.
There isn't an increase in legal of $1.5 million, so I don't know where that's represented.
So I was trying to find legal in the,
Are you looking here?
There's
I'm not
three
seeing it.
different accounts for legal, special education.
Where are you seeing the million and a half?
so legal services
That's
total.
that's level services.
Level services, a total, well, okay, on the
That's the total
line,
budget.
on the line, I was looking at, dog here, what page is?
I think that was in 30-something.
Yeah, that might have been the mistake there on that part, but,
I don't think we have legal services broken out, but you can find it in the line-by-line budget.
Which is what Shabazz was
Okay.
looking at.
well,
yeah.
that's what I was
So-
trying to find in there. I saw one little sub-area, let's see, that one is on 141.
Yeah.
But that's not a huge, and that was under
Nope.
school committee. That's not a
Yeah.
big jump.
Right. Then you can look at page 145, and that's the HR legal services.
That's fine, special education.
Okay.
So that's legal services for staff arbitrations, hearings, termination, and HR matters, that sort of thing.
So if you look at Shabazz on page 101, is the special education legal fees, which is, I think, what you probably want to take a look at.
That was one I had thought
Yeah.
of.
So if you look at that, you see the history of what's been actually spent over time, and some of those costs are related to specific cases.
Okay.
Some are related to questions that you might ask an attorney related to special education. And in some cases, which I would have to go back and check with Rob, if there was a settlement,
Right.
that might be reflected in that line as well.
It definitely
So you can
is.
see the history from FY09 through current, The 32,000 that was in FY13 was because of the retainer.
Right.
So you see the drop in the actual at that point. But you see what the current is because of the overlap between, we had an overlap at last year, I think, I don't even know if it was actual last year, '99. We had an overlap with some cases last year.
Okay.
And so this year, you will see an increase in that line because we need to go back to no longer having the retainer. We
Right.
need to go back to what is a more accurate representation. When Faye and I looked at these lines to kind of get a sense of, because when you look at the lump number, it doesn't necessarily represent the actual activity. So I think we put in approximately around a $68,000 amount as an adjustment to this line to be more consistent what the actual spending has been over, I'd say, about a 10-year period.
Which line are you talking about?
This is on page 101, and it's the 32,000 D4, 530-100 legal fees. It's under Special Education District Services expenses.
In that same category, the tuition non-public,
Yep.
it seemed kind of steady in the 700 to 800 to 600,000 range, but now it's jumping up. There's a big difference there.
And some of that, and I'd be happy to address that a little bit, some of that is around the use of circuit breaker, depending on how much we bring in, because we apply it to that line historically, so that never accurately represent the amount of money we're spending in and out of district. I think over the past few years, it's been around $1 million, $1.2 million,
That's
$1.2 million.
Page 226 shows the whole picture.
Yeah,
It's
so
just
what
what
page is
happened.
that, Rob?
226.
226.
Yeah.
So it shows, I think I want to say the last time, maybe last year, it was
227.
1.2 million. We do have an increase that was represented to the committee, I think in our updates, that we do have a few additional placements, which, again, one placement can be $200,000. So you do see an increase for the projected budget of $492,000 in that line. Yeah.
Well, my mistake was misreading level for legal.
Well, and can I say to the committee, I'm sorry, can I say one more before? One thing too that's really important, and we can talk about how we want this to happen, but this is a lot of information, and as questions come up for you, to write those questions down, and we want to think about what process you'd like us to follow, because you shouldn't have to wait until 4 weeks from now to get your question answered.
Okay.
So we want to be able to be responsive to when you're looking through those lines and you say, this isn't making sense, to have a way to have that answered. So.
Trevor?
You mentioned 3 places where if I wanted to break out the legal fees, one of them was human resources,
Yes.
special ed, what was the third?
And the third is school committee. Yeah, those are the 3 entities that have really access to the school attorney.
So, if I can say something about that, periodically, once, twice a year, we're asked for a comprehensive look at legal fees, and I'd be happy to provide that for you next time. One of the quirky things is that in special ed, we've been recording settlements in that line because we didn't have a different budget line, if you will, expense line to record it in. So we've now set that up. And we could pull that all out and show you what are actual legal fees for lawyers and what are settlement fees to families, kids, whatever.
Right. And that's, before we go, because that's where, when Faye and I looked at the actual expenditures, that's where we are estimating what you typically spend on legal consultation and cases, which is very different from the cases are unpredictable to settlements, so it's hard to estimate. So that's kind of a line that is what it is, and we have a transfer reserve fund in special education to account for those unforeseen expenses.
Yeah, might want to consider that we all submit questions in writing, to Debbie or something, that before the next meeting, like well before the next meeting.
That'd be great.
And
Yeah.
then you could have the answers back to all of us before the next meeting, and that
Sure.
way at the next meeting, we don't spend hours asking questions.
So can I ask if you wouldn't mind a process question? Are people comfortable with sending, when they send questions in, because it should go through the chair with, maybe it goes to Kip with me and Debbie on the emails? Because that way we all have access to those questions, and if you feel the need to respond to any questions separately, I'm not kind of treading over. Does that work?
I'm comfortable with that as long as it doesn't preclude asking questions on the spot, I might.
Oh, God, no.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always welcome to do that, but I just don't want you to wait for 4 weeks when something isn't making sense and this reams of paper.
Lawrence?
Would you prefer that we do it somewhat in a digest form so that we're not firing questions? Does it matter?
You know, I'm okay. I mean, if you want to consolidate your questions, great. If that's not how it's going to come up to you, for me, I tend to kind of, it's in the moment, and I
Yeah.
want to,
Yeah, same here.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Because they're going to come in with Debbie, thankfully, I have a wonderful Debbie.
Yep.
Who I want to, first of all, I should thank Wendy for sitting in for wonderful Debbie, and wonderful Wendy's here. Debbie will consolidate those questions, so they won't come to me in here, now this, now
Scattered,
this.
yeah.
Debbie will bring them together.
Okay.
So I'm fine with either way.
Okay.
Any other questions from the members of the committee? Michael?
I just want to say thank you to the administrative staff. I've seen this before, but being on the committee and getting it in person, it's just a really impressive document.
Thank you.
It's a lot to it.
I want to second that. I've got notes scribbled everywhere trying to compile all this information and figure it out, and you have done this homework for me. This is perfect.
And a lot of people working on this, too.
Annie?
so-
Just I appreciate the transparency and the ability to be able to really see what's happening. Thank you.
And I would like to just say again, the team work that goes into producing all of this is substantial, and it's, everyone has their hand in it. So, Rob leads the finance aspect, and then Kathy's really working on the enrollments and the human resources, and Mike's been really critical this year in the budget process, as well as every other person who leads a department and the principals in making this happen. So it is a substantial effort, but it is a team effort. So thank you. I'm glad we could put it in front of you tonight.
Mayor,
Sure.
let me add my voice to the choir of compliments. This is an extraordinary set of windows onto the district that is just incredibly informative. I'm not sure I could digest it all by the time we get around to next year's budget, but thank you very, very much. I would like to, if I may, articulate one concern that has, for me personally, grown over the years that I've been on the school committee, and that is that particularly as budget discussions, to use your word, become more wrenching, that we try as hard as we can when we're talking about cuts in particular and where cuts are taking place and why cuts are taking place, that we give considerable thought to where some of our problems truly lie. We spend a lot of time talking about the extraordinary expenses of special ed. We are obligated by law, if not by moral, to educate these youngsters. And I'm afraid that quite often, and it's happened, frankly, in Leverett, I think it's happened here on occasion, that we tend to focus on those youngsters and in the process lose sight of the fact that they are the object of what is essentially a legal unfunded mandate. And the burden of responsibility falls for that situation not on those youngsters and their families and their situations, but rather on a legislative body and executive branch that does not have the political courage to do what's right. And I think we need to have that as part of the background for our conversation. These youngsters are not responsible for their situation. And so I think we need to make sure that that stays in our minds as we move forward. Other than that, my compliments to you and your staff, Rob, and I'm not saying you're to blame for that by any means, but it happens all too often, and I think we need to be conscious of what the consequences of that are. But thank you very, very much. Michael?
I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up, number
Yes.
one. And, I say this in Shrewsbury a lot every time we have this conversation, but, it comes down to taxes and funding the public good, of which education is core. And our society does not address that until recently. But I would like to call out at least the representative for the good town of Amherst is taking the lead in doing that. And I think she's got the courage, and I think she should be commended. I think the state senator is coming along. But we didn't have as big a hole before we changed the income tax a bunch of years ago. And if we had income tax, we would still have challenges, but we'd have more resources to deal with them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
The next item on our agenda is 3B, the accepting of gifts. If you look in your packet, you will see that there are 3 items, and I would entertain a motion to accept those gifts.
Rob, usually our gift.
I'm not on it, sorry.
Yeah,
All right. I'll move to accept gifts from Mark and Sheila Hemian Hire for the Ellis Hire Survival Living Fund Scholarship for $500. A gift from Marshall and Annie Jones to the James Faison Scholarship Fund for $250. And a gift from Andrew Horton and the class of 1962 for the Kingley Perry Award for $300.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Trevor seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. The vote is unanimous. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Regional School District Planning Board update, and I'm going to ask Michael if he could give us a brief update.
Did you want to do policy first or no?
No, I'm going to skip. I want to get to
Okay.
you first. Because I also want to thank you and give you kudos for the DESI grant and the work that you and your compatriots did on that. So that's
My pleasure.
A pat on the back. And if you
Very briefly.
if you could include the next 2, 3, 4 meetings that the planning board is having, so people.
That was my plan.
Thank you.
Yes. So we've amazingly had a hiatus of like 2 weeks where we haven't had any meetings. Very cool. So we're at the threshold of a lot of activity. We've, up until now, got money, got consultants, et cetera, and now sort of the output is about to occur. So on February 2nd, I would encourage everyone to be there in the wider community. February 2nd is going to be the report to the community from the consultants on their findings, so the financial consultants and the educational consultants. So the thing that we've all been waiting for that's different from last time will be occurring. It's going to be in the middle school, 1 to 3, and everybody is welcome. The idea is really to sort of hear directly from consultants what they found and have it create an opportunity for question and answers regarding the findings from the consultants. So that's a big deal. The information will be available on the website that the board's been using, and we're going to, between now and then, get the word out through the towns in a variety of ways, hopefully with the newspapers. Subsequent to that, so that'll be February 2nd. Subsequent to that, the plan was the board would be making a recommendation sometime in March. We don't have the date yet. We're going to figure that out next week. But each of the 4 towns will have a forum in each town for its population to have a conversation and basically have feedback. So the idea, just to parse it out a little bit, is that the second will be presentation about information about findings and question and answers about findings. The forums in the towns will be sort of a broader scope of questions about the process and the goals and things beyond just the scope of what the consultants presented, because in the town discussions, it'll be the 3 people from the regional school district planning committees of each town fielding the questions. The consultants don't really have the purview to answer those bigger questions. So that'll happen, I think February 13th, Amherst is happening, is the first one. March 2nd, currently Pelham. This is the last one. Shutesbury has just changed the state, and I forget wherever it is in there.
I'm going to say the 28th.
Okay. So, and those will get posted so people know, but the thing that I would say broadly is that they're different meetings. The consultant meeting on the 2nd is fundamentally different content and dynamic than the town forums, so just people should come to both. And then we are going to discuss sometime in March what the recommendation of the board is. And in between, we've got a meeting on the 16th and the 24th of January. The 16th has been, I think I've mentioned this before, but there's some core issues that we've talked about. One of them is governance. The other is how do you preserve the community school nature of it, that we value in each of our towns. And so we're going to be talking about that, I think, in depth on the 16th, as well as other business. And then the 24th, we're going to be discussing the preliminary findings from the consultants in terms of presentation. So are there things that we feel the towns need to hear that wasn't covered or not explicit? So it's more fine-tuning than anything else. And then the only thing I just wanted to put on our collective plate is if, and I've raised this before, but I think it's just for, in this setting, to raise it for Kip, if the board made the recommendation to proceed, then this committee, we would basically come out with one of two recommendations, either create a K-12 region, a pre-K-12 region, or a pre-K-6 region. And each of those dynamics would have governance issues and configurations attached, and then we would potentially have to consider stuff. Don't know what that is yet, but it seems like in the spring, so just sort of a reminder that based on March, we might have a little bit of work to do as this committee. So I think that's it, unless people have questions.
I think the only thing I would add is that looking forward to the rest of this month in February and March are potentially extraordinarily exciting months where some decisions one way or another are going to be made after months of a lot of work by a lot of people. So it's stay tuned. Thank you, Michael.
Exciting is the flip side of tired.
That's true. Very true. Thank you very, very much, Michael.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving on back to the policy, item 4A, you have before you a policy on class size, which actually has come before you once before, and you asked that it go back to the subcommittee, which it did. What you have in front of you is the result of the subcommittee revisiting this and making changes that it believes are responsive ones to the concerns that were brought up by members of this committee the last time we looked at it. Both Michael and Lawrence are here as well, who are members of the subcommittee. I think, and again, gentlemen, if I summarize things, please let me know. But I think, number one, it was an effort to respond to concerns. Number two was an effort to phrase a policy in such a way so that it enhanced flexibility rather than restricted flexibility on the part of administration, while at the same time putting forth the notion that there needs to be some recognition of the limits to size. I think that might be the best way to very quickly summarize the intent behind the wording that you have here. This is a vote on a second reading. It is not a final vote, but we are asking you to either ask for it to go back to the subcommittee yet again, more preferably to vote on it as a second vote. So, with that in mind, I would entertain a motion to vote to approve, and we can certainly continue to discuss this after the motion is made. Michael?
Not to put you on the spot, I just want to clarify. On the top of the actual document, it says first read, and the agenda, it says second read, so just...
It's the second reading.
Okay.
Because this is, even though it's not the exact, it's a different version, it's still the same policy that we're looking at. So it is the second reading.
So I'll...
Can I have a motion to, Michael?
I'll move to approve, let's see, the policy on class size.
Policy 2B.
2B. I was looking for the letters. Yes. Oh, there it is. Got it. 2B.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion of the policy as it is before you this evening? Annie?
I have a question.
Sure.
I wasn't sure, I thought when we left the meeting last time about this that we talked about not including the elementary school in this, or did we say we were just going to vote on the middle school, high school? Because as a region, we don't vote on elementary matters. How did we do that?
You know, I don't recall it. Michael?
I asked that question. I think Rob provided some historical input that it was, I think the agreement was we shouldn't be, my point was we shouldn't be voting on it.
Right.
Apparently a year ago or plus when it first came up for consideration, there was a decision that historically it was taken as a bundle. So by us approving it, we're only approving what we're allowed to approve. So
Okay.
It doesn't quite account for the elementary and vice versa.
And that
Until they
the
vote.
I think that is what.
Until they vote.
Right.
Right?
So,
Rob, is that right? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
right?
traditionally the policies have been one policy approved by all three boards. So if you approve a policy as the region, even if it speaks to the elementary school, it wouldn't be binding in any way to the elementary schools in question until that elementary school board votes on it.
And can I have one follow-up then?
Sure.
If that's the case, then say Pelham didn't approve this and Amherst did at the elementary level, is that fine? Or is there a problem if they're not in accordance?
It would be documented as approved by the region and approved by Amherst, and it would be documented as not being approved by Pelham.
Right.
So
And
my thinking would be
section.
that Pelham would have to come up with its own.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that there was still flexibility because elementary isn't us, so.
The solution to that is to regionalize, but that's,
Just want to make sure we have our options.
Everybody just does what
before.
Pelham does.
excuse me?
I say everybody should just do what Pelham does.
There you go, even better, even better.
Shabazz.
A second.
Understanding that the elementary school parameters and preferred sizes are not binding, they're merely recommendations. I'm wondering the wisdom of the policy committee in regards to the three tiers there, as opposed to, say, kindergarten through third grade at 17 to 21 and fourth through sixth at 20 to 24.
I could speak to it a little bit. It was last year when the Amherst committee asked for some research to be reviewed around class size parameters. And at that time, we looked at the research together, and I made some recommendations based on that, and we discussed, and at that time, the committee was comfortable with these ranges based on what was considered best practice in terms of research. So this is kind of where we landed at that time after, I think, a few meetings of discussion.
I'll vote for this policy, but I just want to say that I don't think this is something a policy can fix. Like, it's really up to the administration every year to look at every class, and some classes you can get away with big sizes, some you can't, and it's just,
Right.
it's just really all about that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think at that time, too, we did discuss what falls within the hands of the school committee and the superintendent and the administration, and that it's really guidance from the school committee on behalf of the community, and then it is really, there's a lot of factors that play into, and the only kind of real weigh-in would be if it were going to be increasing the budget, then the school committee would really have a larger say in the end discussion around class size.
Rick, if I may, your point is an excellent one, because it goes to a much larger almost philosophical question regarding what should be in a policy book at all. This issue has come up in relationship to another policy, specifically a SPED-related policy, that is currently, as it's written, pretty much nothing more than a transference of state law. And so the question becomes, if there's already a state law, which is what our policy is, why bother having the policy? So it's a pretty fundamental question regarding all policies, but particularly those perhaps in the situation where its impact may be minimal, or where there's already a state law, why the redundancy? So those are some pretty essential questions. Michael?
Yeah, just procedurally, I mean, I think, what Rob pointed out last time and reiterated this time in terms of how we approve things, I'm totally fine with, but I guess I would ask that since we're the region, the way I look at this is sort of almost ignoring the elementary school, even though so I don't think we really should be having conversations about stuff that's not within our purview and hold it to the appropriate committees. And I'm only mentioning it now because I can imagine we'd have other policies where the same thing would happen.
Yeah.
Trevor?
And speaking to the redundancies of this being, state law, and it already carved in stone, and the administration, handles this, and it being spoken in this, in the minutes will reflect this, that the school committee would have a larger say if it affects the budget. It seems to me like that difference should be the policy. Why doesn't the policy just explicitly say, if the budget is affected because of school size varying from this range, that the school committee would vote on it, and that be the policy? That does not, that is in keeping with, from year to year, the administration setting the thing. But if there's an unusual year where, changing the class size affected the budget unusually, that it is our explicit policy that the school committee votes on that. It seems to me like that would be, no offense to your good work here, a better use of paper.
if I understand you
Mhm.
correctly, and I may not, correct me if I'm not, I think it goes to an issue of whether or not we would want to rewrite a policy every year. There may be some matters of operation and management that are such that circumstances are different from year to year, and the policy might be restricted. It might be better off to not have a policy at all and not handcuff either administration and/or future school committees, or place them in a situation where they have to rewrite policies to meet current circumstances only.
But
It's just a response, it's just my response, not anything at all. Maria?
I would also, I think just clarifying too, as a matter of course, we have enrollment fluctuations, or we have, when students do fill out their schedules, we may have such where classes are canceled routine, are not filled and are eliminated for that semester, trimester, whatever. And at the elementary level, we might have a bubble. And what we typically do is we make those determinations around class sizes, and often within consultation with the school committee to talk about we're adding this, but as long as it's within our appropriated budget amount, the bottom line, that's the latitude that we have to make those adjustments as the year unfolds. Because in the spring, when we start to get strong, more solid enrollment figures, we may add a class size para, or we may add another teacher, depending on the circumstance. And as long as it doesn't change what the school committee voted, it doesn't come back necessarily for a vote in front. Clearly, if we were at that point where our budget would not allow for that level of flexibility, we would have to be in front of the committee, because then we have voted a budget that we were not able to live within, and there's a larger conversation.
That's precisely my point. I'm in agreement with
Yeah.
everything you said, and what I'm describing is a policy that takes into account that you have that leeway when classes are dropped, or not enough students enrolled in, and that kind of thing. And the scenario that you described, where if it changes the budget, because this is what we've appropriated for a certain thing, but there's some unforeseen circumstances where the class size has to be this, and that changes the budget, now I will come to the school committee. What I'm saying is, that is what should be, that scenario, whatever scenario you can imagine that would cause that to be the case, is what should be enshrined in policy. That if any scenario makes this situation happen, that the policy is class size will be determined by the school committee if it had to change the budget that the school committee voted on.
Michael?
I think the second last paragraph actually addresses that, specifically. So pretty much what Maria just described, that in early spring during budget development, the superintendent will present to the school committee the class size parameters and student enrollment projections the administration is using to determine the school's budget and staffing needs. So I think, it is pretty much that dynamic. If it was presented to the school committee, something that the school committee didn't like, then our mechanism for tweaking it is to say, we'll give you more money, we'll give you less money, we want to target it. And so the vehicle for guiding the superintendent is through the budget process. So I actually agree that having this in here is important, because it's not that the superintendent just goes off and does it. There's got to be some back and forth, and this creates the place of touching.
I agree. To me, that's the policy. This is a lot of paper. We could have just said that. I agree with you.
Annie?
I was just going to say that the reason I think that these numbers are outlined and that they talk about it is so that, like we came up with our budget priorities, these are the priorities of the district, that we want to keep the class size small, and that this is really sending the message that we want a small class size, and yes, the budget will be affected, but we want to try to make this happen. So.
Any other comments, questions? If not, then we have a motion to approve this policy as it's been presented. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And the policy on the second vote is approved unanimously. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Let's turn you to the calendar. And Maria, go ahead.
Again,
I'm sorry.
Just point of clarification, so that was second read, first vote, right?
Right.
So we have one more vote.
Right. Oh, and one more thing before we go on. The policy subcommittee is meeting this coming Monday afternoon, 4:45, and on our agenda are policies related to some SPED issues and also teaching and learning. And we may have something, but I won't say that. We're just meeting. We're meeting on the 14th. Okay.
He's teasing us.
Yeah.
We don't usually vote on policies twice. We read them twice, but vote once.
You have to vote on them one more time, the final vote.
Okay.
Why is that? What's the
Go
purpose?
ahead.
So we don't do anything rash?
Okay.
So, just calling our attention to the next few meetings. Saturday is a four-town meeting, 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock at the middle school in the library. We hope you will be able to join, for those who can, in your schedules. And it's an important time to really be able to share some information and to start to hear some input from our communities that support our budget. Also, we also have a meeting on January 22nd, which is a joint meeting, which is really more educationally focused. We will have some educational updates as well as my mid-cycle goal formative assessment, I should say. So it's my mid-cycle. So I'll be presenting that, and then we'll be coming back in front of you with very detailed budget information on February 12th. We're in conversation around the February 9th four-town meeting at the moment because we're thinking that may be best served to push off a little bit, but I'm not sure yet how we're going to make that happen. So I'm going to kind of leave that one as an open question at this moment, that date.
That would be a week after the February 2nd.
Right, see, and because of snow date possibility, as well as it's best if the four-town meeting doesn't happen until after you all see the detailed adds and cuts, because then the four-town community has something to react to. Because I don't feel comfortable sharing it widely until you've all had the opportunity to see. So that's kind of, we have a lot coming up this month. It's a busy month, and that's just for this committee and joint committee. We also have Amherst meetings and Pelham meetings. That's it.
Any questions about the calendar? Just a reminder, if you have questions about the budget, please don't hesitate to send any at all to the three of us, whenever you have them. And then Maria and I can talk about how we'll provide the answers to you at our next meeting. Okay, does that seem suitable? Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Second by Lawrence. All those in favor, please raise your hand. We are adjourned at 9:56. Thank you very, very much.
So now if you
No, no,
could-
8:56.
Don't stop.